Welcome to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, where each fortnight you'll hear the stories of industry veterans and learn the secrets to sustainably amplifying value from your software platform investments.
Welcome to episode 3 in my short series on getting the most from your partner relationships. This is Platform Diaries and I'm your host, Shane Williams. My guest today is Matt Owens, Director of Sales and Marketing at NetSuite implementation partner Annexa. Matt has over a decade of experience in NetSuite implementations and turned his hand to sales and marketing just a few years ago. We discuss what a good partnership looks like, how sharing more leads to better outcomes, the dreaded RFP process, and Matt's tips for success. I trust you'll enjoy the interview. Matthew, thanks for joining me on Platform Diaries.
Thanks, Shane. Great to be here.
So, Matt, I appreciate you joining me today. This is episode 3 in a series talking about partnership and specifically getting the best value out of your relationship with your partner. As you know, we've had the previous 2 episodes were with our friends at IBM and Accenture, but today I wanted to change tack just slightly and have a conversation with a boutique partner. And so appreciate you making the time. So to kick off, could I ask you, mate, just to share a little bit with listeners about who you are and your career journey, and then maybe a little bit about Annexa and what it is that you do now?
Thanks, Shane. Great to be here. So I've been in the ERP implementation space for 12, 13 years. I started off in consulting, implementing ERP, mainly the finance systems for companies, before progressing into project management and pre-sales roles. And then now I've crossed to the dark side and I now head up a sales team, director of sales and marketing at Annexa. So yeah, I suppose I've worn a few hats when it comes to ERP and systems consulting. Annexa is a NetSuite partner. So we specialize in implementing ERP systems for mid-size and enterprise customers. We do end-to-end systems integration for NetSuite. So, effectively everything from the GL supply chain through to integrating commerce systems. And having a ball in the sales role. It's certainly a little different from back in the day when you and I were in the trenches, Shane, implementing out at REA. But yeah, really enjoying it nonetheless.
And then obviously most people will understand REA as realestate.com.au. But my experience is that you guys do a fair bit of work in digital retail. Is that still the case, mate?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So yeah, super proud of the clients that we've got in that space. But I suppose anything where there's a bit of sophistication to the process and ambitious growth plans is the nature of the projects that we like to get involved with. So I think the realestate.com.au project, that was a great one. Good story there with the growth of that business. In the retail space, we certainly do work with some very high-profile retail brands. A couple that come to mind is probably Aesop Cosmetics, really long-term customer, big global powerhouse when it comes to retail, great product, great brand. Really fortunate to be able to have partnered with those guys and deliver value for the business.
And so you talked a little bit about how you'd come through the ranks, if you like, in terms of delivery. And for the benefit of listeners, our relationship was back in the day in the trenches, right? Not necessarily in a sales context. Do you think that time working through implementation gives you let's call it a competitive advantage or even just a different perspective on partnership in your new role?
Absolutely. Yeah, we live and breathe implementing systems and supporting customers. Everyone at Annexa, particularly in even in the sales team, a consultative approach to the sales cycle is really important. It enables us to speak the right language with customers, relate to the work that we need to do, and I suppose just come across as consultative, working with businesses as opposed to that of a more typical sales organization.
Yeah, I like to refer to it as being of service. I think that I've never been comfortable with being a sales guy, and the irony of expertise, delivering CRM software for years, largely telling salespeople how to do their job and then actually having to do it and realizing how much harder it is when you've got to do it. But I think, and the reason for my question is my reflection on now being able to get out there and have meaningful conversations with clients about how to leverage the best value out of platforms. I think if I hadn't been in the trenches for years wearing those scars, I'd be a bit of a fraud. And so hence the question was, do you feel similar? And so you've gone through that journey of consultancy through to sales. Do you think that gives you a better perspective on partnership?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that, every customer that you engage with, you learn so much. And I think being on the project team size where you're running projects, understanding requirements, and really getting to the root of the nuances of implementing systems, you can relate to customers better. I think a lot of salespeople struggle to relate because they maybe are a little too salesy. And I'd like to think that's pretty core to our process, that we are very consultative and we genuinely understand the nature of the beast when it comes to implementing systems.
Awesome. So with a bit of context out of the way, I might dive in because we've got a bit to cover today in a short period of time. The reason for this series is interesting. I've said this a couple of times. The impetus for this was a couple of people called me out as having not covered the topic of partnership and the SI and client relationship. And it was very deliberate putting it in the book, because I think it's one of those topics that it could be a book in and of itself. So taking a few different perspectives on this one, I'm using a consistent set of questions, if you like, talking to the partners. And so I hope you haven't already pre-thought your answer, knowing what's coming. But I guess the first question for me is, I've been guilty of using the terms SI and vendor interchangeably. And as you probably know, having worked with me before, I've got a pretty healthy skepticism for a lot of things. But I reckon there's a real tension between, or at least my perspective is, there's got to be a real tension between hitting a sales target and living up to the promise of partnering. And I think if there's CFOs out there who share that cynicism, then I'd love to get your perspective on perhaps giving us some insight, is probably a better way to describe it, insight on what partnering looks like to you and how do you achieve that balance between, hitting your target and hitting the outcome.
Yeah, it's a good one, Shane. Nice little curveball there, mate. But yeah, it's fairly complex, right? There's a lot of moving parts. There's multiple people in a relationship to bring this together. I think from my perspective, the success that we've had in the market is all based on long-term partnerships and relationships we've got with customers. And I think that the key thing here is that, a software vendor, from my perspective, they're there to build and sell software, and an SI or a software partner is, their primary business model is to make it work. So, for us, we often have to battle against the vendor as well, because effectively we're almost sort of on client side as we work with clients to, maximize the investment in the software and make it work. So often than not, we have to be pushing back to vendors to help drive outcomes. And I think it's important for CFOs to understand that, SIs are there to achieve that. They're there to implement software. They're trying to achieve an outcome and make the software do what it's supposed to do, as opposed to just trying to get another number on the board. In saying that, the nature of partnerships with vendors, they are very focused to selling software. They push their partners to sell and sell. But at the end of the day, for a boutique like us, we live and die by our ability to deliver. So if we can't deliver, the timing or the complexity or the requirements or something doesn't fit, it's important that the decision makers and the clients making decisions on buying software, they understand that. They understand that it's not in an SI's interest to be committing to something that's going to be problematic.
Yeah, that's interesting. We haven't covered that before. I said before that a lot of the conversations I have with clients is being independent, in that I don't sell software or professional services in terms of delivery, right? And I've had a number of conversations where, going into looking for a partner, there's very much there's often a perspective that I want one throat to choke, or, in some organizations, they reterm that to I want one back to pat. But, in essence, it's the same message, right? I don't want to get to a situation where if things go awry, that there's finger pointing between partner and vendor, and I'm the guinea pig stuck in the middle paying the bills. And so I've seen this sort of, if it's CRM, I want Salesforce on the hook, or if it's, ERP, I want Oracle on the hook, right? And asking them to partner and deliver both. Then there's this other perspective, which is I don't want the one because they're self-serving, right? There'll be this perpetual, I could solve this problem really simply with a couple of days worth of people time, but I could also get a perpetual license cost out of you by recommending to buy software that you didn't actually need because I'm, lining my own pocket. And I don't necessarily think either of those are always true, but there's definitely conversations that happen client side that sort of talk to this stuff. And then what I think is fascinating is there's guys like you who kind of operate, I don't own the software, but I can sell it and I'm responsible for implementing, but I'm the guy you're going to yell at if it goes pear-shaped, not some sales dude. So, I haven't explored this with anybody and I apologize, but could you talk to us a little bit about maybe lift the hood for clients who've never worked in consultant world or in software world? Is there a secret handshake that goes on that determines, if you're getting introduced as a partner, how do you, talk me through it. I'm a client. I go to Oracle and say, hey, I'm looking at your product. I don't want you guys to implement it. I want a partner. How does Annexa and Matt Owens end up in my office? How does that work?
I think the main thing is, proven ability to deliver, capabilities, reputation, all those things come to mind, when being referred in. And I think that there's a lot to be drawn from industry expertise, deep vertical expertise runs on the board. And certainly the folks at Oracle, they're not going to refer someone that they would have any concerns about the ability to achieve. So their success is going to be to get the strongest partner to get out there and achieve an outcome. I think the lens is very different. So the value proposition from the perspective of a vendor versus that of an SI is quite different, because the approach to practically making software work versus what it says on the marketing brochure can be few and far between. And I think the localized experience that an SI or a partner would bring for sure would give a customer a different lens on how a bit of software can add value to the business.
So thanks for answering that, Matt. And I apologize, I haven't actually asked the previous two guests the same question. So question without notice, and I appreciate you answering it. So the next, where I want to go now is back on script. In the genuine spirit of mutual partnership, and I've said this, it's putting aside this kind of, if I'm a client, if I was to park my trepidation in playing my hand such that it could be taken advantage of, but in a scenario where I'm not going to be taken advantage of, and I can put all my cards on the table, I'd love to get a perspective from yourself. How would a ideal client approach a partner with a project? So is it, for example, here's the outcome I want and here's how much money I've got? I don't think it's as simple as that, but like by way of example, because I'd love to give listeners a bit of a perspective on if you want to get the best outcome from approaching a new partner and setting the relationship up the right way and making sure you get the outcome and the right commercial outcomes and what have you, what's the best way to go about it that makes life easier for the client as well as for you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the ones, if I reflect on engagements that are really smooth, not from a sales process perspective, but from an end-to-end delivering an outcome, getting value, as well as working through a sales process, the more we know, the better, right? And I think that there's a lot of stuff that customers know already about software. The modern customer is well informed. They do their research. There's so much of information available, and they're looking for someone that's going to coach them through and be really, realistic about navigating, all those things and making it happen. So to me, that the ones that work well, very clear on where the business is going, right? Very clear on how our solution is going to help them get there. So as an example, coming to us and saying, hey, I need a financial planning module, or I need a GL, that's easy. But if we understand the growth of the business, what we're going to be supporting 3, 5, 10 years, then it's going to enable us to size the work, prioritize the work, and build a foundation that's actually going to support where they're going, as opposed to just coming in and flicking some switches. I think they're the ones that get into trouble, maybe where there's surprises down the line, or they haven't future-proofed their systems because they maybe haven't shared enough with us with respect to where they're going. So I think we need to just tackle the conversation with an open mind. It takes a little bit of time to build that relationship and open the doors up to share that information. So I suppose our aim here would be to walk them through our capabilities, how we work, and what we've done for other businesses, to give them the comfort, that we've walked this path before. We understand what they're in for, and I suppose that we're being real about our experiences and what works and what doesn't work. I think that's really key in a long-term partnership.
So to summarize, it might be have a fair idea about what you need now, but also where you're headed, to try and make sure you're giving a holistic picture before you dive into solving the problem that's right in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think benefit, sort of realizing the benefits of the solutions that you're looking to deploy when you think about value to the business and try to prioritize. A lot of companies that we talk to, some of them do that really well, and they go, this is where we want to go, this is what we think we need, and this is what we think the outcome should look like. And then it's quite easy for us to talk to a solution and how it'll support them right now and where they're going. Other businesses, it's more of a tick box exercise with requirements. And yes, a lot of vendors will be able to tick boxes, but if we don't understand what the longer term goal is, or even the midterm goal beyond right now, sometimes they're not getting the solutions right. I think, Matt, you and I have probably seen this before with working on solutions with customers where, I think meeting requirements now versus future, it happens so fast. You get 6 months in, the goalposts move, and then, sometimes you need to double back, and we could have avoided that should we be a little more open with where we're wanting to go.
No, that's fair. I think when you're building that relationship up front, there's often this tension that I find between the client's perspective on what a new partner is expected to invest in terms of pre-sales, and how do you get that right, this expectation that if you want to win my business, you'll invest. But likewise, I've said before, I think that there's a place for investing in yourself in terms of making sure you're getting the right advice, but often met with, so you want me to pay someone to tell me how much they're going to charge me? And I mean, I've been guilty of it in the past too, right? Being hesitant to pay for discovery. But I'd love to get your perspective on what does that look like from the partner's side, and is there a better approach?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I guess the different businesses have different expectations of how they want to run an evaluation and get to that stage. I think businesses that invest money and time into trying to build a roadmap, understand where they're going, prioritize the different systems that they think are going to help them get there. If they have that conversation up front, definitely it's very smooth for us. And our most common approach would be pre-sales is always pre-sales. We don't really need to enter into a commercial exercise to build a quote. So for us, it's normally a pre-sales exercise. It's expected that we need to invest fairly heavily in that space to gain an understanding at an appropriate level of detail to size the work effectively. We take that part really seriously, because it's a conversation that you just don't want to have halfway through a project if you've undercooked a quote. It's not in anyone's interest to have that conversation. So we need to get that right and invest the time up front. The challenge there and the delays are usually on the client side, where there's a misalignment of priorities of what they want to do. And we can spin our wheels a little bit there, where, we're kind of demoing solutions and figuring out solutions, and the business isn't clear on what they want. And I think that's the section of the pre-sales engagement where we then need to change our tact and say, well, look, guys, we are going to coach you through our recommendations based on our industry experience, and this is how we think you should structure it, and then effectively go the other way and walk the client through a leading practice approach and skin it that way. Either way, pre-sales is a cost to our business, not the client. And we're certainly demonstrating our understanding of their business, their industry, and ways of working in order to build up that confidence and secure their business.
It's interesting. So in one of the previous episodes, I think it was Lee Siamas, he sort of said, I think there's an approach where you could offer to put money on the table to say, I really want to get this right. So I know that this exercise to do some prototyping and help us thrash out what it might look like is, give me a quote. And you go, oh, it's 10 grand. You say, okay, so if you do this work and you come up with some prototypes and we like them, and on the back of that there's some designs which largely I could then lift and take anywhere, then that's work that you're going to have to put in that should be costed, right? But his view was he thinks that there's an opportunity to say, well, how about if we said, if you do that work and then I don't give you the business to do the implementation, I'll pay you for your time. But if you do this work and we agree that we're going to do the implementation, then that becomes the sum of your investment in winning the business. Do you think that works in a smaller boutique like yourselves, or should clients be asking that as I guess it was an idea that was thrown out there. Do you think it's a reasonable approach?
I think that the more due diligence that goes into design or pre-sales or whatever you want to call it, ultimately is all knowledge that the teams build that adds value to accelerating the implementation. So whether it be done on the delivery side, post commercials being signed off, or pre-sales, it's still very useful information. In saying that, the commercial value of getting a design with a partner and sort of stopping there and then evaluating it, to me, is a bit of a waste. I mean, I've had businesses come to me in the past and go, well, look, I've spent a bunch of money, I've got all these designs and what I want to do, can you come and deliver it? And then the reality is, well no, because we then need to go back and validate all of that and do all our own designs again anyway. So, we're not going to be entering into a project that someone else has designed purely because, we don't understand their approach, their ways of working, their thinking, their level of experience, all those things. So we're going to go do our own DD again anyway. So it doesn't really work. So the preference would be we're transparent with the way the quotes are constructed, where the areas of risk are, and we're saying, well, this is a leading practice approach and what a budget would look like. However, based on the conversations, this may be a process that requires more attention. This is how we're going to go mitigate that by maybe there's budgeting more time, or maybe we're going to do an extra pre-sale session to dive a bit deeper into that particular requirement. I would rather tackle it that way and get that confidence that we understand the impacts to the business and how the efforts are sized, and then progress.
Fair enough. Thanks, mate. Now I'm going to take us down a rabbit hole of, let's call it hashtag unpopular opinion. So last two episodes, I've thrown this out there being a bit provocative and seeking a response. I still stand by what I said. I don't like the traditional RFP process, and I think it's flawed. I think there's a lot of burned time that adds little value, and I think we need to kill it. But I can see that there are multiple perspectives on better approaches. And I can also see that there's some people who are very wed to, a spreadsheet and a bunch of people filling in boxes. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. But I would like your perspective. So I put it to you that RFPs are a process we need to kill. Discuss.
I'd be more slanted toward the kill RFP approach, mate. But to be honest with you, box ticking exercise is a very difficult way of an assessment. Ticking boxes against requirements, the devil's in the detail, right? So you stack up a couple of different software platforms and vendors and tick boxes. It's only going to get you so far. To me, the real value there is really just assessing capabilities of platforms and vendors, and the real good stuff's going to come from alignment, cultural fit, team expertise. That's the area that I'd be investing my time, not the 4,000 rows on a spreadsheet with tick boxes. So for us, I kind of shake my head a little bit because most of the time the tick boxes, they don't mean anything, right, without a process flow. So I think it's outdated, it's antiquated, and it's not really productive in terms of getting to the next step and the real root of what the vetting process could look like.
So do you think then, I mean, this could be controversial, right? If there's a CFO listening or a head of procurement who's going, you deal in implementing ERPs or I'm probably being unfair to NetSuite, right? But let's just go with ERP for now, even though we know it has CRM and a few other things. You deal predominantly with, finance departments and whatnot. And there's a CFO sitting there going, no, my procurement team thinks RFPs and spreadsheets are the best thing since sliced bread and it's the way it's always been done. You sure you want to go out on a limb and go kill it?
Yeah, I think the devil's in the detail, yeah. Shane. So I had one recently that a prospect engaged a mid-tier, accounting firm to do the process for them, who generally speaking are still pretty old school in the approach of evaluating systems and go down the route of RFP. But even they had changed their tact, and effectively they had run their due diligence that would enable them to write an RFP, but framed it in a way that really just summarized the outcomes of their analysis, number one, summarize all of the key data points and functional areas that they needed. And then the validation process was really more, can we meet these requirements or not? Do we have capabilities at a higher level, which was sufficient for them to then shortlist vendors and then work through the really good stuff, which is, hey, let's test these guys and assess their ability to come up with solutions for some of these requirements and get a level of confidence. And that process actually went really well, where we could really grab the information, we could show our creativity, demonstrate our capabilities by giving them some scenarios, and we really just got to that point much, much faster. So I think that was a great example. I've had others where you've got the 4,000 row RFP and ultimately you go through the vetting process and all of that stuff is a waste when you then sit down with a subject matter expert from the business who describes the process, which is completely different to what it looks like in the RFP. So yeah, I'm pretty open with that with our prospects, that it is a box ticking exercise and it's very hard to differentiate. I don't think you can differentiate a lot of systems when it comes to comparing them with ticking boxes. The detail is going to be in the process and the application.
And is the same true of assessing partners?
Absolutely. I think the process is also similar. This part I think is more critical. I think the alignment of the people that are going to be working with your business for the long term to make this stuff happen is absolutely critical, even more critical than the actual tool itself. That's controversial, Shane. Forget the RFP. But I think at the end of the day, if you've got a great team and really strong alignment with a partner, you will deliver great things. You can have the best tool, the fancy Salesforce modules, but it just does not work if you don't have the right cultural alignment. So to me, the RFP process needs to cover off capabilities, people, team, culture, values, those types of things. But it's also going to be heavily supported by relevant industry experience and demonstrated partnership, which I think comes out pretty naturally when you see those questions. I think most of our prospects are pretty good at doing that part of it, but perhaps opening up the conversations around, approach, ways of working and people, I think should maybe happen more early in the process rather than toward the end. I think that'd really help businesses fast track their evaluation and sort out who's going to work and not work.
So I think I was to summarize RFPs, it sounds like there's a place for an early evaluation to narrow down, for lack of a better term, to a short list, but it's not an extensive several thousand line spreadsheet because you're not going to be able to get a sense of the types of people that you'd be working with and the cultural fit out of a spreadsheet. And largely everyone's going to tell you that they're the best fit anyway. Is that a fair assessment?
Yep. Yeah, I think it sizes the prize, like it sizes the effort at a high level, but it's not gone is the traditional RFP where you're literally giving them a proposal on the back of this document and then working through that proposal. It's fair to say that's a thing of the past.
And you think it is a thing of the past or should be?
I think it is. Okay. I think the notion of an RFP now is a vetting process. It's not a give me a proposal and I'm going to go and use that as the basis for my future discussions and wrap up a finalized proposal. it really just is a vetting process, and then the vendors go and do it their own way as opposed to sticking to the RFP process.
I mean, I can't say I've ever asked, even when I've run an RFP process, I've never asked anybody to give me a proposal on the back of a spreadsheet. But by the same token, my reflection after a few years of doing this is that if I put a lot less emphasis on filling out thousands of boxes with detail and just got to the high level, what matters most in order to narrow it down so that I can have deep conversations with 2 to 3 tops organisations to really get into the detail, that would add a lot more value. Is that fair?
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. So now we're coming up towards time. I would, as I always do, like to get you to summarise, if you like, and give listeners the 3 key takeaways about engaging with a partner.
That's a good one. So key takeaways, be open, be clear about where you're going and how the solutions that your partner is going to help you get there, not just right now, but try and think a little more tactical or strategic if you can. Number 2 would be, don't spin your wheels on an RFP. Box ticking is not going to get you there faster. Be clear on the outcomes and the assessment criteria. So I think that's probably reflecting on our last question, Shane. That's probably another way of summarizing that would be, be clear on what your evaluation process needs to look like. Like, what are the things that you really non-negotiables for your partnership and your software vendor, and stick to your guns, because I think that's a lot of customers don't do that. They just start talking to people and then see whatever way it lands. So that's important. Number 3, think about the relationships, cultural fit and alignment. I know for Annexa, we've had tremendous success with our customers with really strong relationships. So think about the cultural integration of the teams, the ways of working, and practically how you're going to work together to get it done, and really have that front of mind, when engaging with SIs.
And I suppose then to that end, it's probably a bit of, do you like to tell the partner how things are going to be done, or do you want to be advised and consulted through the process? Because I imagine ways of working is not just how do you deliver software, it's ways of working around how do you work with the people, right?
Yeah, both. And a lot of businesses are going to have, ways of working that they'd like to stick to. So we're very flexible to try and take that on board and work with to the best of our abilities. And then the flip side would be, we can walk through what we would recommend leading practice and how to approach. And more often than not, they'll take some feedback from that into their process, and then we can work together.
Awesome. Now, mate, before we go, it would be remiss of me not to let you have a bit of a plug. So if people are listening saying, you know what, we are looking at evaluating ERP, or we're looking at finding a partner to help us do a NetSuite implementation, how do they get in touch with you?
Personally, just jump on LinkedIn. Probably the easiest way, send me a note. More than happy to have a direct discussion. Annexa.com.au is our website. You can take a look at our capabilities and some of the clients that we work with across ANZ. Yeah, more than happy to point you in the right direction, whether it be a fit for us or not. We're sort of 30 years plus in the ERP space, so we're kind of seen all shapes and sizes. So, yeah, more than happy to have a chat with anyone and assess what they're trying to achieve and point them in the right direction.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks for your time. I'll also put your details in the show notes so people can click on those. It's been great chatting. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Cheers, Shane. Thanks for having us.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. For more information or to contact Shane, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.